Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are following the show via Facebook on the live stream. We appreciate that very much. It's not just your imagination. We're doing two shows today because we had to do our show with Jack Russo. We can't miss that one if we could avoid it, right,
well,
Jack?
thank you. Thank you for taking me, Joe, because I wasn't sure this week if it was going to happen, but I did get here, and I did actually make it without a ticket, no flashing red lights, a lot of traffic, but actually the Tesla reroutes you if the traffic is bad. And the funny story I tell about the Tesla really fast is I went to my dental appointment this week, and they said, your teeth are great, like, what are you doing? And what I realized is when you put a Tesla into auto drive mode, it gives you time to floss your teeth. I mean, this is the future of how dentists can sell Teslas, and this may make this whole thing go viral because Elon Musk yesterday in the presentation of the shareholders about their successful quarter said, you know, a lot of people don't know this, but if you click the stock that does auto drive and you click it down, it just gets you directly home. Like they put a little automation hack into it that no one knows about, and he feels the salesmen aren't telling people about it. So he wants to sell more cars. So he's out there saying, hey, there's things that really age your life, and what he missed was the footnote, and then you can floss your teeth on the way home. I mean, you're private, you're in your car, you're minding your own business. You know?
That's good. That's good.
You can't visualize that, can you?
Can't. Well, we can, but some people can't.
Some people won't.
Well, we are live in studio with Jack Russo. He's the managing partner for the Computer Law Group. As most of you know, we've been following the show for, I think this is our 17th or 18th show. We're doing a series on starting something new, Silicon Valley. The focus really is Jack has taken us through what it takes from the stage of you have an idea, and then what do you do with the idea? Then you develop that. You develop a team. You raise money. We've gone through really every aspect, and now we're getting more into the litigation of the things that you hope you never get into, but you have to educate yourself and understand how you prepare yourself just in case, right?
That's right. And the formation of an entity, whether it's a corporation, a limited liability company, an LLC, a limited partnership, they limit liability, but not as well as most people want to imagine they do. So there are these exceptions. And the one I want to talk about today, last week we talked about trademark or trade name infringement. This week we should talk about copyright infringement. Okay. So this is the major federal lawsuit that's sometimes brought, and sometimes it's brought by a photographer, sometimes it's brought by a company that has a video that they think you've taken advantage of, and they sue in federal court for copyright infringement, and they typically sue both your corporation and you individually because the Copyright Act enables, under our current federal law, for you to seek liability from those who control the infringement, and control is broadly defined. So what I brought in as the prop today is, you know, historically, people still, but not maybe millennials, would read magazines. So one that was at my doorstep today was Punch, Spirit of Peninsula. I didn't even know what this was. I always thought Punch was some sort of British magazine.
What does it stand for?
So Punch is just sort of the name that they decided to put on this magazine, and it's a little bit like, hey, rich people, you're living this great life, and let us show you how to live a better life. So it's probably mostly real estate, a lot of real estate ads, a lot of stuff for how to fix your real estate. It's a real estate show, so it fits. But Punch is a name that I think if we did the search, we'd find out there's a British publication that's called Punch. So that could be a trademark or trade name infringement. But now you look at the cover, and the cover is, you know, a couple, and they've got a convertible, and it looks all beautiful. For those of you on Facebook, I'll show it. there's often photographers that'll say, I took that photograph.
Oh, interesting.
And they pulled it off of some media and put it on the cover of this new magazine that's now making, they'll allege, millions and millions of dollars. And I want all of the profits from what the magazine made. Now, the people who are running the magazine, I don't know if they have legal. We could flip to the masthead. I'm just using this as an example because if you have a website, think of your website as almost like a magazine, which is it's going to have pictures, it's going to have text, it's going to have images, it's going to have content. You're supposed to, under our current copyright law, you're supposed to make sure you have permission for every item of content. Now, you do live radio shows, and we don't copy anything. We just work live in real time. So there's no worry about this stuff. But if I brought in a bunch of content and said, hey, let's now show this piece of video, you would say, well, wait a minute. Did you get permission? Is that your video? Is that your picture? I brought in the actual physical magazine. They can't dispute that. I'm showing the physical magazine. I own the copy of that magazine. It was gifted to me. It was on my front lawn this morning, right? So you look at it, and it's just a good example of liability can arise. Now, what do you do when that big federal lawsuit comes in? Or let's take the flip side. You're the photographer. You see this magazine and you say, wait a minute, I never gave them permission to use that photograph on a magazine. I gave permission, perhaps limited to use on a single ad.
Okay.
And you can do that in copyright. Someone seems to have captured this moment of a sunset. The photographer would argue they perfectly captured going down Route 1 in the cloud cover with the sun either coming up or coming down. I think it might be coming down like a sunset, right? It looks like a sunset to me. And they're in a convertible. It looks like a classic Porsche of some sort. And it's the moment that's, you'd say, well, that's really a basic photograph, but the law gives a copyright to the person who snapped that picture, right? That is pretty automated if you think about it. But he or she might say, I took a lot of time to do that photograph. I got the pose. I took 50 photographs to get to this one. I took 50 takes. He might have had someone barking orders. Hey, put your hands up now. Don't put your hands up. The copyright law treats that choreography as protectable.
So not to throw a wrench in the whole thing, so this gets into even the Facebook and the social media with images, right? Pictures. And
throughout. And what Facebook and Google and other carriers are almost like carriers. They get the right to be free of this liability under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act by dint of if the photographer sends a notice to them saying, that's my copyrighted photo. They did not have authority from me to put that photo up. And there's no objection made when Facebook or Google give notice back to the site that, hey, we got an objection. Facebook and Google have to take that down within a reasonable time. If they don't, then they become liable, which is why if you're representing the photographer and this is somehow being spread on social media, you say you have to give a takedown notice. This is why in the terms and conditions, if we can go back to that early discussion we had about the importance of terms and conditions, you must actually put in there the name of the agent for receiving those notices. That agent has responsibility for managing the site and for dealing with what are called takedown notices. So we've set up this way to allow some sort of free flow of information, but the reality is we got to balance the free flow of information with the originality and protection of works like photographs, of which there are so many photographs.
Does the same thing apply to words?
Yes, words as well. Taglines, too, potentially.
If someone says, wait a minute, Perfect Summer Days is mine.
Well, that might be viewed as generic. Obviously, there's a line between generic, descriptive. There are First Amendment values at stake here, so there are limits, and it really does become where does it cross the line between functionality and art. Like you could even say what we're talking about today is pretty functional, but we're doing it in kind of an artistic, jocular way, and we're adding some comedy and levity to it. So we have our own personality that we've added to this, which adds to the value and makes hopefully people feel like, hey, that was a useful use of my 25 minutes here today. besides hearing Russo complain about the traffic in Silicon Valley.
And flossing his teeth.
And by the way, we should add, today was the day Apple hit $1 trillion.
Yeah.
$1 trillion. And if you go back to the original story, you may remember my previous law firm, God bless them.
You need to tell that story real quick.
They incorporated Apple. We filed the original paperwork.
What year was that?
This was back in the 70s. So this is back at formation. Apple, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak came in. They unfortunately did not dress well for that meeting. Strike one. They did not bathe, so they didn't smell very good for that meeting. Strike two. I would have said, hey, man, these guys are working hard. But strike three was the corporate partner. I'll leave his name out because he is still alive. I'm sure he must hear this story so often. He said strike three was they had a goofy name for the corporate name. Apple for a computer company? I mean, that's the funny part of the story, because now it's a mega brand. That $1 trillion valuation, it's probably $800 million worth of trademark goodwill.
He kicked him, not kicked him out, but he said, "No, we're not interested."
No,
right?
He said, you got to come up with the cash. Cash, rule one, cash, and then rule two, cash now. And rule three, don't forget rules 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That's the sort of basic, how do you run a business kind of thing.
And I know it's just speculation, but that would have been today worth what? Crazy. Hundreds of millions?
Well, think of it this way. Let's say, I mean, I don't know how far the story goes. Some people said maybe the firm could have gotten 10%. I think that's pretty aggressive. It probably wouldn't have been that much.
Right.
But imagine they kept whatever they kept.
Right.
Through the stock splits and through all the gains. I mean, there probably is some old lady shareholder. Maybe it's an old guy. Maybe it's an old couple. That would be even better. I mean, look, they did that film with the one about the Vietnam War where
Forrest Gump
film gets a letter from Apple. We're proud to tell you that your stock is now IPO'd, and he's like a billionaire at a young age. But the point is, let's say someone bought some shares of Apple back in the 70s. Wow. And they're sitting on the splits that happened and the growth that happened. I'm guessing that stock would have been worth at least $100 million bucks, probably a lot more. And the law firm, which I think is celebrating its annual meeting today, I got a call from one of the partners. He was laughing. Hey, we're having another annual meeting. Aren't you glad that you don't have to come to it? He was kind of joking with me. And I said, you know, you guys should be really proud. Today, Apple got to $1 trillion. Yeah. You guys are part of that story. He said, don't tell me about that story again. Please, don't remind me. But the point is that Apple has succeeded, even in the face of so many challenges. People thought IBM owned the computer industry, and they're now bigger than IBM. They're bigger than Google. They're like 20 times bigger than Ford. Ford is like a tiny company.
And then at one point, they were on the brink of failure again, right?
Microsoft.
Remember when they had to bring Jobs back?
And Microsoft bailed them out before then.
Isn't that ironic?
That's really ironic. And the final thing we'll say, I know we're taking a footnote here, is Jobs' daughter, Lisa, has written a book, and today, the same day Apple hits $1 trillion, Vanity Fair issued an article about this book that's coming out next month by Lisa, where she talks about what life was like with her very, quote, difficult dad. Oh, man, you have to read the excerpt. I mean, I don't want to give a plug here to Vanity Fair, but they sometimes do have some great writing, and there's a story in today's thing, and I forwarded that to one of the partners at my previous firm, and he said, man, she's only telling half the story. There's a lot more that can be written and said about that, and I'm sure it will happen.
So they're a classic example of some of the stuff they overcame and some of the stuff we're talking about today.
And they've succeeded, if you think about it, in the face of many challenges, many likely failures, and in many ways, you could say people like Elon Musk were motivated by the success that Apple had. You could say a Tesla is like an Apple for mobility. Yeah. If Apple is sort of like a brain tool, Tesla is like a mobility tool. And these tools are trying to build on this idea of simplified technology. And, of course, all these laws that protect things like photographs are saying that creativity should be protected. And the Apple would say, absolutely, it should be protected.
What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and I know it's hard for us to do that because we're on a roll right now.
Yeah, we're on a roll.
Well, at least we think we are.
We're
going to take a quick break. This is Joe Kuchera sitting alongside Jack Russo, and today we're talking about the crisis of federal court litigation over copyright matters, and we were giving some examples, Jack was, of Apple. So stick with us. For those that are following us on Facebook, we're going to take a quick 1-minute break for the podcast. We'll be back with you in just a minute. Thanks.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Getting ready to buy or sell a home in 30, 60, or 90 days? Check out BundleSelect.com to find out how you could save 20% or more on your entire transaction, real estate, lending, and title. With BundleSelect.com, technology and a personal concierge are at your service to save you time and money. BundleSelect's hand-picked team of experts will compete for your business so you'll save thousands of dollars by bundling real estate, lending, and title services. BundleSelect.com gives you all the control, including using your own realtor. I'm Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, and I have been on the radio educating consumers for years. I'm here to tell you BundleSelect.com is the best way to save money on real estate. By bundling services, you could save tens of thousands of dollars. This savings model could save you money on your move, lower your interest rate, or cover your closing costs. Visit BundleSelect.com. That's BundleSelect.com.
The estimated minimum savings are based on a comparison with the national average. Individual results may vary, and the estimated savings are not guaranteed. Bundle Select Inc. is a licensed real estate broker. California Bureau of Real Estate Broker license number 004666902.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Welcome back in. Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. In studio today, Jack Russo, the managing partner for the Computer Law Group. Our ongoing series, starting something in Silicon Valley. We're at our 17th or 18th show, I believe. And today, the topic, Jack's talking about the crisis of federal court litigation over copyright matters. We're using Apple for examples. And it's been a fun series. We've got a lot of good response and feedback from it. I know you are, too.
Right.
On and off. It's good, I think, primarily because, Silicon Valley is a very intriguing place. And whether you live here, and we even get downloads all over the world, actually, now. And I have to believe that it's because people are wondering what's going on over here, right?
Well, Silicon Valley has become its own brand. We obviously even have a show now on HBO. It's very funny. We watch it and laugh. It's extreme hyperbole about what happens in Silicon Valley. It's done very well. I think of all the places in the world, I was on the phone late last night with some clients in Germany, and they were like, you guys have something special that just seems to get the creative juices going. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain density of that creativity that generates companies like Apple, like Google, like Tesla, like these great companies that are becoming standout companies. I mean, to talk about a company being worth $1 trillion, let's put that in perspective. That's more than 50% of the countries of the world do not have economies that even get to $1 trillion. Like, I think that's close to, or maybe years ago you'd say it was close to the economy of India. Like, the economy of India generates gross domestic product of $1 trillion. That's a lot to imagine. One company, and by the way, I think it's like 25% in cash. There's like $250 million sitting in cash that you have to wonder, what can they do with that cash? They could acquire, as I said, if they could acquire Ford Motor Company is in the dumper today. It's under $50 billion. It's like 5% of Apple. Apple could peel off $50 billion and buy a car company. It's an iconic car company and put a bunch of Apple electronics into the dashboard and change the company and give Tesla a run for their money.
That's a really good point. I think people make examples of Amazon like that because they say we're concerned that they could flip a switch.
Right.
And Apple could, you just gave the great example. And Amazon, they could flip a switch and say, we're going to go into this business now.
Yes. They could flip a switch, and what's hard to understand is why Ford made an announcement that they're getting out of the passenger car business, I just about fell off my seat. I've been such a long-term, and my parents have been such a long-term holder of Ford stock, of course, miserable throughout the whole holding period. Yeah. But when you look at their decision, they think they're now a truck company. And they think the only car they're going to make other than Ford's, and this we're going to bring this back to copyright in a second, but the only thing they make is the Ford Mustang because it's such an iconic car to their brand. Yeah. But why wouldn't the Ford executives have said, look, we're going to get out from doing the Escort and the Taurus and all these passenger car lines. Why don't we go to Apple and say, how would you like to take over all these blueprints that are copyright protected, designs, all the software that runs those cars, just take it over from us. We'll give you a great deal. Just cut us a check for, I don't know, like $5 billion? Yeah. How about like $3 billion? Just give us some money. Yeah. If you want to take over our manufacturing lines and our people, put your electronics inside these cars and make them the cars of the future, because mobility is going to match lifestyle in a way that's changing things. And Apple wants to be in this game because they think your next office might be inside your car or your next entertainment place. And all that is driven by copyrighted works that are protected by federal law, exclusively by federal law, and where the recourse is in the federal courts. And we staged this to begin with, that you've been sued in federal court, which is a big deal because most lawyers are not that competent at doing federal cases, and most federal judges are tough on lawyers, tough on deadlines. All of the deadlines are electronic filing. There are lots of lawyers that don't like that. They like the ability to sort of deal with paper. They're not used to this electronic future. So really you have to hire typically a more expensive lawyer who typically is going to require a larger retainer, who typically is going to have a more advanced practice. And for a lot of people, it's like a big deal to be a defendant in a federal case because federal judges have a lot of power, and the federal system is complicated, much more complicated than the state system. So when you get sued for copyright infringement, or if you're a plaintiff suing for copyright infringement, you're going to end up expending more time, more money, more cycles, and there's going to be more procedures than what typically happens in the state courts. The state courts are not bad, and they're moving in the direction towards electronic filing too, but the federal courts are way more advanced, and the federal judges are much tougher on following the rules. And the federal system basically operates on a very strict set of principles that are called the federal rules. And there's federal rules of civil procedure and federal rules of criminal procedure. And in copyright matters, the judges take those cases seriously, and you're going to end up typically spending a lot explaining what you did if you didn't get permission. So obviously, first rule that could come from this, if there's any uncertainty of where the thing came from, get permission in writing, at least an email confirmation, ideally a signed writing. If you're uncertain, don't use it. If you're even ambiguous about it and you don't have permission, take your own picture. Look, there's a lot of great cameras on the market. There's a lot of friends that have sports cars. It may not be the exact sports car. It may not be the exact coiffed, beautiful people, but get two people, maybe you have a couple of students in your studio to drive the car and say to them, they're looking at you, are you crazy, man? We would never do that. But you can go down and find a place to do this and take your own picture, and then you own the copyright in that picture. The fact that you copied the idea is permitted. So that's the second principle to keep in mind. The idea for driving a car down a road that has a sundown going down is generic and in the public domain. People have thought about that fantasy from day one. Oh, I just want to meet the person that's the love of my life, and we'll drive down this empty freeway, no traffic. I mean, this ideal sunset moment. And you could put your hands on the wheel, and I'll have my arm around you, and I'll have one hand on the wheel. That's marketing. That's what marketing is all about. But marketing does rely on copyright works. And then the third thing is the best ways to express ideas. You'd like to have a good idea, but you'd also like, and you're entitled to look. And these books, I mean, I get a kick out of flipping through them because I say, they probably spent a lot, like maybe a couple $100,000 putting all this content together. It's expensive. Yeah. And then They don't charge for the book.
I know, isn't that amazing?
They charge for the advertising.
I don't know how they do it. I really don't.
I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
it's a tough, and of course, this is where the third principle comes in. Paper products are going away.
Right.
I still am old-fashioned. I think there's something really romantic about a paper product. As you know, I take notes.
Yeah.
I use yellow pads. I still have pens with ink in them. But people look at us like, hey, like these folks that are here as your students, as your externs, they're all typing away on their devices. They don't have pens. They don't have pads. They're like looking at us like we're grandpas here. You know, what do you mean you're going to ask me to look at a magazine? I put that in my backpack. It just weighs things down. It takes the room of 2 tablets. I could have 2 iPads at this point. So the third thing I'll say, and then we'll pause, is you do have a right to what's called fair use as well, which means if you have an idea that you think is good and it derives from one of the ideas on any of these pages or anything that you see, and you do enough transformation of that idea in a way that doesn't exactly copy it but creates what's called a transformative work, you have what's called a fair use right to do that, because the world wants to incentivize building on ideas.
Got it.
They want to enable building even on some expression.
Right.
Even if it's like, well, you know, we're using a man and a woman and they're both about the same age. Yeah, but that's really just building on that idea. You might dress them up differently. You might make it a sunrise instead of a sunset. There'll be some transformation.
Right.
It won't be an exact copy.
Right. Just a few minutes left. So what happens if, you talked a little bit about this, Jack, but what happens if then someone contacts you and says, hey, wait a minute, you're using that, stop it right away, or I want money, or so what does a person do then if they get to that point?
So if they get to that point, let's say you're someone
that you used
it and you're like, hey, I thought it was clean, let me investigate. What you typically want to do is go back to the source that you obtained it from. Sometimes you'll have an indemnification agreement. Actually, in the case that I'm referring to that came in this week, there actually was an indemnification agreement, so that puts the responsibility for the lawsuit on the originator. Now, typically, that person will either have insurance or will have a defense fund or will say, oh, I got to figure out how to take care of you, or I got to refund the money and try to make a settlement, because part of what you paid for was coverage that you would not have this claim. So you could think of it like title insurance in the real estate concept. Title insurance is saying, you, the owner, swear that you have good title, what's called good and marketable title, that you could transfer this property. I relied on your statement, but there's a guarantor behind it, namely the title insurance company, that's batching together all this money and then distributing a few percentage of it to people who, hey, you didn't have good title and we didn't pick it up in our title search, so we have to pay or reimburse or do stuff. These days, given how much is out there in a public way on the public register, title insurance is probably arguably overkill, but no lender will lend against it. They'll say, forget it, we've got to be protected here, we can't take the risk. That concept exists by analogy in the area of copyrighted works, but most people don't think ahead, hey, I should get some indemnification protection. They often think, oh, I'll just sign this agreement, pay the fee, and move on. The reality is you're hoping to buy good title for the use of that copyrighted work. And you might be surprised if it turns out it's not there.
Yeah, very good. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so before we leave, make sure the listeners and the viewers, now the listeners later, Jack, know how they could reach you if they need some help or they have some questions about you and your firm. Right, so it's Computer Law Group in downtown Palo Alto. We also have offices in San Francisco. It's Jack at computerlaw.com, J-C-K at computerlaw.com. The phone number is 650-327-9800. In general, we see the whole range of startup entrepreneurs to public companies and everything in between. And we try to help as best we can people in all those different walks of life, plaintiffs, defendants, parties who are in the middle sometimes between plaintiffs and defendants. There sometimes are people who are third parties who get dragged into cases and they're like, how did this happen? We see that. So sometimes we see members of boards of directors that say, I don't know how this happened, but I'm getting dragged into a dispute between two co-owners and now they're dragging me into it. We represent those as well.
So we're happy to talk to people. Obviously, the best way to reach me is probably the email these days, jack@computerlaw.com, or through the phone number 650-327-9800.
And also note, too, Jack and his firm are on the website, our website, RERadiolive.com. If you go under services, there's legal services, real estate, taxes. So Jack and his team are under that as well. Thanks again for checking in today. Thanks for watching the show. We always appreciate it. For more information, download the podcast. You go to RERadiolive.com. Until next time, take care. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.